Thank you so much for coming along to our Edit With workshop with Joe Houghton on Conversation. This is the first workshop in 20. And this one, we focus on mono processing, and it's wonderful to see different approaches to the same image. And if you enjoy this, then please do head on over to the on-demand part of the website. There are actually around 400 things that you can go and watch on demand, including lots of other interesting workshops from Joe, interesting workshops on Photoshop, macro photography, still life, intentional camera movement, all kinds of things. And there are over 100 live things that you can book as well.
Fabulous. Thanks, Mark. And lovely to be back. And I mean, lots of familiar faces and some new ones as well, which is great. So those of you that have been to one of these before, you know the drill. This is going to be, well, at least 20 sessions, and I've probably got another 10 as well that I haven't told Mark about. So we might extend this again at some point. We've done a Lightroom step-by-step kind of series, which we finished just before the summer, I think, something like that. So we thought, what can we do to kind of keep the momentum going? So this is going to be kind of similar but different. We're mainly going to be in Lightroom, but we will jump out into other things. We'll jump out into Topaz and Nik and maybe Luminar or Photoshop or whatever if we need to, and it kind of makes sense to do that. And I'll try and stay on top of new things that are going on in the software as well. So if one of those pieces of software brings out something super duper that we can't do in Lightroom or whatever, I might kind of use that day to show you a little bit of that kind of stuff as well. But I don't just want this to be purely just me doing Lightroom editing. When kind of I put this idea together, and I ran a similar series with the RPS last year, so I've kind of run it once, if you like, and kind of shaken down some ideas. So the idea is we take a genre each day. So today is mono, and I mean, if I share my screen and we get so some of you have sent in, Mark sent out a link for you to upload raw file, and if you want to, your edited version of that file in 2 different folders. So here we are. So we've got Conversation, Edit With Joe. So the first session is mono, and I've uploaded at 9 o'clock this morning. I went on to Google Drive, and I just pulled those 2 folders down and popped them into Lightroom. So those are the 2 folders, and I'm just showing you the raw unedited images that we've had sent in today. So those are the ones I'm going to play with. But what I also want to do is kind of maybe just kick off each session. And I mean, there's a lot of horsepower in the room in terms of photography knowledge and experience and all the rest of it. Yeah. To maybe just have a chat about, right, so if we're going to shoot mono, what should we be thinking about? Okay, so almost before the post-processing, what should you be thinking about if you're going to shoot mono? What images? What kit choices might you make? What might you be thinking about as you're walking around, looking to take an image that you're then perhaps going to convert into mono, or do you want to end up in mono? So really, we just want to kind of broaden the spectrum of what we're going to talk about, if you like, in that space. Okay, so Claire's saying she's only just managed to upload her images. Okay, Claire, well, if I get chance at the break, I'll try and go back to Google Drive. But if for the next 19 sessions or whatever, if you can get your images in before Saturday morning, okay, because I will generally be having my coffee sitting in bed with Penny and my iPad, and I will be uploading them at around about 9 o'clock down to my machine. Okay, so I'm not going to guarantee that people who kind of are uploading images at 10:15 or whatever are going to get them processed in that session. So try and get them in for Friday night, so that Saturday morning they're in those 2 folders that Mark has given you the link to, because it gets very messy having to try and download things 3-4 times and into the folders and stuff. Okay, now a couple of other things that I'm kind of producing. For all the sessions, there is an optional handout that if you want to buy, you can. Mark will have all these And I think he's also doing a deal on kind of all of them as well, for the whole series and stuff. So this is the one that I've produced for today, editing with mono, and it's 19-20 pages normally, something like that. So before the shoot, what to consider before the shoot, things to think about during a shoot in terms of mono photography. Yeah. And then some post-processing kind of tips and tricks and things to think about when you are using post-processing. A section on great mono photographers. So, I've given you some links to Cartier-Bresson here, Ansel Adams, Salgado, Don McCullin, Michael Kenner. Yeah, so I'm just picking half a dozen, people who you should be aware of. And it might be nice for you then to click on those links and kind of explore a little bit further. Giving you some links to some books that relate to the topic that we've been discussing, some websites and maybe YouTube channels and stuff like that. Okay, so that's the idea behind those handouts. I've also, and Mark doesn't know this yet because I only did this morning, I've also put together a little Notion page, and this is going to build, okay, during our 10, 20, 30 sessions or whatever. Okay, so I'll share this with you now, this link, and grab this link. And if you click on that link, it'll open in a browser. Okay, and then just add it to your favorites or add it next to the conversation link or whatever. Okay, because this will just be a persistent link, and this page I'm just going to add to as we go through the program. Okay, and what this is going to be is a kind of like a Q&A, questions that come up that maybe I don't know the answer to straight away. Yeah, but I'll go and find the answer out, and then I'll add it into here. Okay. So I've just put the link back to Mark's main page for the Edit with Joe there. Okay. And then, so Mike Sweeting is with us this morning. Good morning, Mike. I can see you there now. Yeah. And Mike emailed me in the week and he said, is there any chance that you could cover in the mono kind of session how to set up a reliable sepia conversion? Okay, great question, and it's just slightly off fundamentally main central topic, but I mean, it's absolutely on point for mono photography. Okay, so I did a little bit of research and I fired it up into Perplexity and various things this morning. So here we are. Here's Mike's question. Okay, and if you click on that little down arrow, this expands. And what I've done here is I've given you a step-by-step to creating a sepia tone preset in Lightroom. Okay, so that's the first question, and then all the sources for all that stuff. We've got various articles and YouTube videos and stuff. So again, if you want to go down those rabbit holes, yeah, you can spend the rest of the week looking at sepia tone. Yeah, so that's in there. So as I get questions over the next 6 months or whatever, I'll just keep adding new questions into that list, and it'll just become another resource that you can use. And I'm sure Mark will add that to the yeah, he said I'll link that to that on the website straight away. Okay, so that's just going to be another source of information for you. Okay, so we've got the optional handouts. We've got Mark's kind of Zoom summary that he sends out after everything. Yeah, and because I've run these sessions once before, and I kind of know the tips and tricks in the handouts that I wanted to cover. I have a set of handouts already prepared, if you like. So over the summer, when I was bored, yeah, I actually published 3 books. So I've put together the first 10 handouts for this series in a little book. And here's the book on Amazon. Okay, so it's called Let's Shoot and Edit. Okay, and it's a nice little, just about an inch thick book, and all those handouts are in that book. It's a 230-page book. Okay, and, it's available in hardback or paperback. So if you want the book rather than to buy all the individual handouts and having to print them all out yourself and all that kind of stuff, yeah, there's the link to it on Amazon. Yeah, and I was very chuffed. I went on to Amazon this morning, yeah, and here's the Amazon bestsellers for photography today. So there's Shoot and Edit. Yeah. And here's my 2 new Lightroom books that I did as a result of having done the Lightroom step by step. And I released these in August. And they've consistently for the last month been in the kind of number 1 and number 2 spot on Amazon as well. So I'm feeling ridiculously chuffed with myself at the moment. As a photography book author to get into the bestsellers list, and the links to those are here on the page as well. So if you haven't yet seen those, or you'd like to pick those up, there's the link to them, Claire. Okay, so they're in that Notion document there. Okay, so you can just click. So if I click on this link here, that opens up Amazon, and there you are. You've got that step by step 2, and then that one I think will take you to step by step 1. Yeah, there we are. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so sales pitch over. Forgive me, Mark. He'll never have me back on. Never.
I'm just going to jump in and say Joe was kind enough to send me a couple of his books, and I thoroughly enjoyed them. So I'm going to back up what Dot has just said with congratulations and fantastic from Glenda. Absolutely, Joe. Thank you.
Super. Well, your copy of the Let's Shoot and Edit book is due to arrive on Tuesday, Mark. So keep an eye out for the Amazon, man. Okay. Wonderful. No, it's not, because I had to just order it from Amazon and have it sent to you. So I didn't it hasn't come here, and I haven't shipped it from Ireland. So sure. Okay. All right. So that's part of the kind of stuff that we're going to give you. Okay. All right, so that we don't need that open anymore. So let's come back then to Lightroom, and let's just start having a think about mono. Okay. I love mono. I've always loved mono, and Mark does too, and I know quite a few people kind of in the room, enjoy mono photography. It's representing the scene with kind of just 2 tones. It's normally light and dark, but it could be sepia, it could be kind of brown and white, or whatever. But it's that monochromatic, one color, if you like, approach. Why would we do that? I mean, crazy, isn't it? The world's lovely. It's in color. Yeah. Why would we want to kind of show things? Why would we want to show things without the beautiful color that is all around us? Well, from an artistic point of view, when we subtract, and this goes for composition as well. Composition, the classic thing is kind of eliminate. Okay, leave in just what you need to tell the story, to convey whatever it is that you're trying to convey. And when we subtract color from our images, it simplifies them visually. It takes away a layer. The color layer, if you like, is a complex set of information for us to decode visually. And particularly if you're like me and you're colorblind. Yeah. Because then you're not even seeing the same colors that everybody else is seeing. Okay. So if we go to mono, then all of a sudden we don't have to process as much. And a mono picture feels different. There's something, I mean, I always feel that mono is almost moving you towards kind of, fine art or whatever. There's that, I don't know what it is. There's a feeling to mono, isn't there? And I mean, this is what a lot of art is about. It's not, you can't necessarily put your finger on it. You can't necessarily describe it in specific, 1, 2, 3 terms and stuff. It's about emotion. It's about feeling. It's about this stuff that you can't quite describe in words. And that's why we do photography and painting and music and all this stuff, to express this stuff. So mono is a very powerful medium. Not every image that you will take, not every scene that you find yourself in front of will be maybe suitable to become a mono image. So very often what we're looking for is contrast. Now, if you're a fair weather photographer, kind of like me, yeah. Let's hope it doesn't rain on you in Eastbourne tomorrow. Okay, but if you're a fair weather photographer, or you're one of these photographers who, I've always had problems getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get the sunrise. Yeah, yeah. Margaret, you're nodding too. Yeah, it's yeah, that golden hour thing. I mean, you've got to put a lot of effort in for golden hour, haven't you? Particularly in the morning. So maybe I'm going out at 11 o'clock or whatever when the sun's quite high in the sky, and I've had my breakfast and I've had my coffee, and it's time. It's time to get up. And the light isn't quite as good then. And now the sun's in the sky. We've got quite harsh light. We've got sharp shadows because the sun's out and all the rest of it. Oh, well, we can't do any photography then, can we? Yeah, yeah. You can only do photography in golden hour. Well, that's rubbish. Yeah, I mean, Mark's not going to take you out tomorrow and say, "Oh, it's 10:30, right? We'll meet back here at 4:30." Yeah, when golden hour's starting again, you're going to be wandering around and you're going to be shooting all day. So you can shoot in any light, but you need, and sometimes a harsh light is great because you're getting dark shadows. You're getting very brights and very darks, and that's typically when maybe you're in fertile ground for black and white conversions. So I'm expecting great things from the spawn crowd. Okay. in terms of what we're going to get, even though you're going to be shooting for maybe landscape, which is in 2 weeks' time, I think, isn't it? Form. This first image here is an interesting one because it's a detail from what presumably some kind of train rolling stock. Yeah, and it's more about form than anything else, isn't it? There's not really any color information apart from that stuff in the background, which we're going to lose when we go to mono anyway. But we've got these very strong lines of particularly this circle of the wheel in the bottom right-hand corner. Okay, so quite often this is something, if your image is going to be about line, shape, form, yeah. If you follow Mark's images, he loves escalators. Yeah, and we see all these shots of escalators, yeah, and there's all these kind of moire lines of all the steps going up the escalator, and there's the converging verticals and all the rest of it. And they're almost all of his shots are in black and white. His escalator shots are in black and white. Yeah. It's been really interesting, Mark. I've been following your shots from Chicago. Some fantastic images. That guy with the colors behind him. Oh, just unbelievable. But it would be interesting to see whether that one, for instance, worked in mono. It probably doesn't. Yeah, because those colors behind him, when they're converted, maybe don't jump out as much. Yeah. So some images work, some images don't. Okay. This one of this bridge, I mean, we've got long, we've got that lovely lines into the vanishing point and stuff like that. The colors, they're not really adding a whole lot to this scene. Yeah, and when we convert those to black and white, we're going to subtract that distraction, and it's going to become a shot all about the convergence and all about that journey of the eye from the front of the image to the back of the image. So this is what we're thinking about. Okay. There's nothing specific in terms of kit, particularly, that you absolutely need with mono. Any camera, any lens, you'll be grand. Okay. It's really about reading the scene in front of you and processing it through that mental thing of, okay, is this gonna look good if I take the color away? And that's a skill. Yeah. Most modern cameras will give you the option in the settings somewhere to show, even if you can't see the live view, when you're looking through the viewfinder or on the screen, even if that's always represented in color, and a lot of cameras will do that, some cameras will let you actually switch that to mono, switch that to black and white. And certainly on my Fuji, my X-T5, when I take the shot, you can tell it to then show you the thumbnail in either color or black and white. So when I'm doing my street photography, for instance, I always set that to black and white, because I don't really want to process the scene in color. I want to try and mentally see, and also then when I'm chimping, my shots, I want to see them in that initial rendition of black and white that I get from the JPEG that's shown on the back of the camera. And then obviously I'm going to bring it into Lightroom later and tweak them and stuff like that. Okay. This all making sense? Yeah. Yeah, cool. Tips, tricks, thoughts on black and white, thoughts on, things that you should be thinking about or whatever. Again, let's curate the knowledge in the room. Stick them in the chat. Okay. And then we've got them as part of the discussion and stuff like that. Okay. Right. 10:30 is coffee time. It's not. 11:30 will be coffee. Well, 11:25 will be coffee time and scones. Yeah. So we'll have our scone at 11:30. But yeah. Right. Okie dokie. Have I missed any questions, Mark? I haven't really.
So, no, there are no questions at all. I think it's just really interesting. I think a few of us are sharing our Instagrams, and it'd be really interesting to see what people are doing in their black and white work, and also any ideas that people have. It'd be great. One of the things that I know we've not spoken about, and I'm not going to pause, Joe, but I do like the idea of people sharing an image and then perhaps letting other people edit it just to get different takes on it. Now, that's asking a lot of people, so I'm going to start that off. I'm going to put one of my images onto a website and say, listen, go and have a play with that if you'd like to. You don't have to, but if you would also like to let other people play with your images just to see what we can get, do the same, but you don't have to.
That's a nice thing maybe then to kind of share in the conversation community.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that people can see what, Mark put this one up and here's my take on it or whatever. Because it's really interesting to see how people go differently with an image, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we are not a protective, or what's the word, we're not insecure. I'm quite happy for you to come along and say, Mark, that's rubbish. I've got a much better crop. I would love that. But equally, everybody else as well. But sorry, Joe, please do carry on. Thank you.
No, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the conversation for me is my kind of photographic home now. It's kind of where I come, and I know I'm kind of safe, and the people in it are not going to be picking holes. They're not going to be scoring points. I think it's the best community for photography that I've ever come across, and I've been in most of them in my life. 63 years of kind of doing photography. So if you're new to Conversation, if this is your first series with us or sessions or whatever, it's a really friendly, welcoming place, and nobody is going to pull you apart. We're here to build each other up. We're here to kind of encourage each other, and we're all at different points on our photographic journey. Yeah. And we all are constantly learning. I am, Mark is, everybody is kind of learning, and we all bring different things to the party, if you like. So yeah, it's a fantastic community. Yeah. And you can see from some of the stuff in the chat there as well, other people agree. So, okay, let's play with some images. Now, I'm just going to pick images and at random, but if I know kind of some people have uploaded one or two, whatever. So if I've already edited one of your images and I start to edit another one, and it's one that from somebody that have already edited one of your images, just let me know so that we give everybody a fair crack. I may not get through all the images. We're just going to have to kind of like, what's going to catch my eye and what are we going to edit? Okay. I'm going to start with the bridge. I like this. Okay. So let's have a little play with this. We're in Lightroom Classic. I'm on a Mac, so it might look slightly differently to the Windows version, but fundamentally they're pretty much the same. Okay. Version number at the moment of Lightroom Classic is 14.5.1. So if you haven't updated now, the 14.5.1 version, as opposed to 14.5. So if you haven't updated in the last 10 days or so, you might be on the earlier version. One of the things it introduced was a much faster import and processing of all the previews. So when you kind of go to a folder that you haven't visited a while ago, and it's building up all the little thumbnails in the grid view, yeah, that has dramatically increased, and particularly with computers that have some kind of a graphics card attached. So it seems to be one of those kind of good updates to definitely apply. Haven't heard any problems about the 14.5.1 update, but on my machine, it made a huge difference to the speed of Lightroom, which is pretty good anyway these days. But okay. So Chris was so Jill's saying this is a high-level bridge in Newcastle on Tyne, and its claim to fame is that it was in Get Carter, the original. Okay, yeah. I haven't seen Get Carter. I'll have to make a note of that. That's like saying you've not seen Kill Bill or you've not seen. Yeah, I know. Right, I'll add it to my list. So let's run off to the develop module then. So D for develop. Now, oh yeah, let's come back to grid for a minute. If I want to convert this just from color to black and white, I can do it even in the library module. There's a shortcut key that we can use to do convert to black and white. And it works here or it works in the develop module. And it's completely a random shortcut key. It's V. It's V for victory. Okay. It's not B for black and white or anything like that. It's V for victory. All right. So if I press V, yeah, that now switches it. You see, V, color, black and white. Okay. So that works when you're in library, and it also works when you're in develop. Okay. So in develop, if we have a look under the basic panel here, yeah, if I press V again, then you see nothing's highlighted up at the top there, auto, black and white, and HDR, because it's just a color image. It's just the normal. But when I press V, it's just the same as clicking on there where it says black and white. Okay, so that's that's one way of doing it. Okay. And you see when you switch from black and white, you see when we've got the color image up, you see the histogram in the top right hand corner there. Yeah, it's showing actually 3 different sets of information. It's showing a red, a green, and a blue set of information, and then a gray one, which is a combination of all 3. When you click into black and white or press V, yeah, that histogram, you don't get the 3, you just get the single histogram, which is just the black and white tones. Okay, so that's just something to note as well. Before we make that change to black and white, one of the things that a lot of people overlook in Lightroom is this profile option here. So when you take a shot, and I'm assuming that most of you, and maybe I shouldn't assume this, but certainly I think most photographers who take photography quite seriously and are going to do lots of post-processing afterwards will generally shoot in RAW. Okay, so because a RAW file captures 3 or 4 times as much information and keeps it as does if you shoot in JPEG. Okay, because JPEG is what's called a lossy format. It throws information away. Okay, and just keeps enough information to kind of render the scene. Whereas a RAW file renders the scene, but keeps all the information about the shadows and the highlights and all the different colors and things. And you've got a lot more potential with a RAW file than to adjust things. Okay. So when this first comes in, Lightroom will generally know which camera this was shot on, because the digital information from the camera doesn't just record the image, it records what they call metadata, things like the camera model and the camera, serial number and what lens was on it and whether you use the flash and all that kind of stuff. So information about the image, metadata. And one of the things that comes down from the camera is the kind of profile that the camera used to take the shot. And sometimes you can choose different profiles in the camera. You can choose, on Fuji, we've got kind of Acros and Provia and these different profiles and things like that. And this will often come up here. And if it doesn't, it'll just assign a standard profile. Okay. So here it's just assigned here, Adobe Color. Now, there's a couple of new things that came in about 6 months ago to Lightroom called adaptive profiles. And these are sometimes quite interesting just to try, okay? And this is kind of an AI, it's Lightroom's AI, just saying, oh, let me color process this image to what I think is the best. So if I did that, now, has it made a lot of change? Not sure. Let's have a look at what the histogram does when I switch it back to Adobe Color. There's some stuff that's been happening there. Yeah. So adaptive color, you see, it's got brighter. It's raised the highlights and the shadows and stuff like that. But do you notice that when I choose these different profiles, there's nothing happening down here? None of the sliders are moved. Look, so if I go back to Adobe Color and it darkens off, yeah, none of the sliders are moving here. So this is the profile is Lightroom reading the raw file in a different way and processing it before you even get to any of the sliders. Okay, so we've got these different profiles. So here's an adaptive black and white profile. Okay, so you see, right, so it's bringing up the detail a bit more. It's giving us more light into the scene and stuff like that. Okay, and you might kind of try that and say, well, that's a better starting point for me than that. Okay, so these profiles are just kind of giving you a different jumping off point. And if you click there, you know, we've also got a standard Adobe monochrome. Okay, so you see that's really just turned it into mono rather than into black and white. But there's also this little three squares icon here, and that gets you into lots more. Okay, so if you've chosen favorites from the list below, they're here. Okay, and we can just hover over any of these representations. So there's a brighter one. Okay, there's another one, and then, you know, we've got some others here. Yeah, so black and white, there's 17 different renditions of black and white in this profile section here. And as I hover over each one, you can see that the image is just slightly changing. We're getting a slightly different look. So that's a kind of like a grayer look. Yeah, black and white 10. Whereas if I go to black and white 9, you see it's kind of a bit more punchy. It's a bit more contrasty. Yeah. So sometimes this is a good way to just get started, if you want to, is to go and explore these filters. Particularly if you're not, you know, really, if you've never done any black and white before or whatever, and you just want to see some possibilities. Okay, those filters are great. Okay, now I don't kind of tend to use them a lot because I'm one of those really sad people that just enjoys fiddling. Yeah, you know, and I like to come into Lightroom and do this myself. I like to kind of do the exposure and contrast and stuff myself. Yeah, but let's say you had 200 images, you know, you'd shot a wedding and it was going to be all the shots were going to be in black and white. Well, you don't want to fiddle on 200 different images. Yeah, what you might do is say, right, you find one that gets you most of the way there, one of those profiles, and then you apply that profile to every image in the set. Yeah, and you've done 60% of your processing kind of is kind of taken care of already, and now you can do the tweaks to individual images and stuff like that. Yeah, Gina, it's one of those things. It's been there forever. Kind of those profiles have been there for a long time, but they're really easily overlooked, aren't they? So yeah, but yeah, I mean, Lightroom therapy, Mark's quite right. You know, I just like sliding sliders and seeing what happens on the screen. You know, I can lose hours doing that, hours that I should be out shooting. But you know, that's another story, isn't it? Yeah. And Chris is saying, yeah, some of those profiles are very dark and moody. Yeah, absolutely. Now, maybe that's what you want today, Chris. Yeah, maybe you're in a dark and moody mood. Yeah, and you see one of those profiles and and that's what you see. Or maybe you don't. Maybe, you know, you see one of those profiles and it's a punchy, you know, contrasty kind of with lots more light in or whatever. And that triggers something in your head. Oh, I hadn't visualized that shot like that yet. And that's where I find the profiles are quite good, because they cause you to see the image in a slightly different way that you hadn't maybe mentally processed it yourself before. And that might take you off, you know, on a different creative route than what you otherwise get. So yeah, all the mindful stuff is wonderful. Okay. So I'm just going to say, turn this into black and white, shortcut key V to do that. Okay. And now I'm going to start playing in black and white. We've got the basic tab, and then we've got tone curve. Now look, it said black and white here. When the color image comes in, that third tab for most people says color mixer. But when you switch it into black and white, the color mixer tab changes. And I have had phone calls from people saying, I've lost my color mixer tab. All my colors have gone. What's happened? Kind of. Yeah. Well, that's it. It just switches between those two tabs as you switch between black and white and color. Okay, in the basic tab. So this is very often, the first place that I will start with an image. Okay. I'm just going to shut that off to the left there. And what I also normally do is set Lightroom up when I'm editing black and white. I quite like this background here behind the image to be quite dark, because if this is a bit bright for me, this gray. So if you just sit the cursor on the background here and right click, yeah, you can change the color of the background. So I'll normally set it to either that or black. Now, when I'm editing black and white, I'll normally use that darker gray, because if I make this black, yeah, and now some of the edges of my image end up completely black, I kind of lose the edge of the image. Yeah. So the dark gray kind of, keeps the edges of the image available to you, if you like, visually. So that's that's useful. So normally my workflow would be figure out the composition first. So crop first. Okay. If there's any kind of immediate issues around the exposure, we'll kind of play with the white point and the black point, and make sure that all the tones are within the limits of the histogram, okay, as we want them to be. And then I'm going to go off and play with colors or tones and stuff like that. So let's kind of follow that workflow. And one of the ways of setting Lightroom up to follow that workflow. So I reloaded Lightroom recently because I got a new machine. Okay, and I haven't had time to do this, but I would normally start with kind of cropping and transforming right at the top of my workflow. So I generally move that transform up above basic, just to remind me to do it first if I need to. The way you do that is you can come down to any of the tab titles and just come to the left of the word and right click. Okay. And you can now customize the develop. So I can customize develop, and I can grab that little hamburger icon next to transform, and I can slide it up to the top. Okay, like that. And now I can save that. Now it's going to say, okay, in order to make that happen, I'm going to have to relaunch Lightroom. Well, I'm on a reasonably quick machine, so let's let it just do that. So close Lightroom down, and then it'll start it up again. And when it starts up again, okay, here it is starting up again. Okay, we're going to see when we get back into develop that transform will be sitting at the top. There it is. Yeah, isn't it nice to have a fast machine? Yeah, I know some of you are looking at me and saying, how did Lightroom start that fast? Yeah, yeah. So that's one of the nice things about getting a new fast modern machine. Okay, so now transform is up at the top. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the crop tool. Okay, and the shortcut key for crop is R. Okay, it's not C, it's R. Why am I going to do that? Well, now we can start to make some kind of compositional choices on this image, can't we? The O key cycles through all these different overlays that you might want to use to kind of, organize the elements of your image. And very often I'll use this overlay, the rule of thirds overlay. Okay. If you don't want the overlays up at all, and you just want to crop the image, visually just to without any distractions, the H key hides and shows the overlays. H hides and shows the overlays. O cycles through the different ones. Okay. And if you get to an overlay that has some different options, like this one, okay, Shift and O cycles between the different options for that particular overlay. So if I press O now and I go to say this one here, okay, now Shift and O gives me all the different options for that overlay, 8 of them, okay, which can be quite useful. But when I take the finger off the Shift key, press O again, now I'm onto the next overlay, so I can just cycle around back to rule of thirds. And if there's only, if you only ever used like 2 of those overlays or something like that, somewhere up here, Lightroom, where's my overlays? It's under tools, I think. Yes, tool overlay. Okay. And what you can do here, is you can choose kind of which ones to cycle through. Okay, so if you come down here into crop guide overlay, choose overlays to cycle, it gives you a list of all those overlays. Yeah, and let's say that you never, you're never interested in that 5th overlay. Okay, in fact, the only 2 overlays that you want are rule of thirds and the center, and the let's say. So I'm just going to uncheck all the other ones for now. Okay. So now, as I press O, it's just those 2 that are left. Yeah, and I've just told it ignore all the other overlays. I'm never interested in them. Don't want to use them. Okay. So I better put those back, because otherwise I'll be doing a talk and I'll be saying, "Where's my overlays?" And I. Yeah, so let me just turn all those back on. Otherwise, I'll get into awful trouble in another talk when I've forgotten that I changed that. There we go. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question there from Mark. Kind of who uses other overlays other than rule of thirds? I mean, that's probably the basic one, isn't it? Now, I must admit, I regularly use okay. I regularly use that one. Okay, because that's your bullseye. That's it, when you want something smack in the middle. And we might use this if we were choosing to kind of put the vanishing point right smack in the middle. Well, that would be a good overlay to use for that. Yeah, for instance, because now you can see you've got it bullseye. Okay, so that would be a use of that. The the diagonals, maybe not so much. Yeah, this kind of stuff, not for this image. Okay, but the rule of thirds might be a useful one, because again, now we can start to organize the image, and maybe we want the vanishing point on the top thirds line. Yeah, or maybe we want the vanishing point on the bottom thirds line. So now we can use the thirds line. And do we want the vanishing point centrally like that? Yeah. Or do I want to put the vanishing point maybe on that bottom left-hand intersection point of the thirds? Yeah. And this is where the overlay can be very, very useful, because now I can move things around and I can try and I can say, well, I want to experiment with different ways of visualizing this image, and maybe, if I wanted to put the vanishing point down there, well, then I would have to maybe lose some of the rest of the image to make that happen. But that's okay. Yeah. So we've got the chance to kind of play in different ways. And again, particularly in black and white, where form and line and shape are so important, and almost more important than in a lot of color images, I think this is a very, very important first step that you should play with. And those of you that have been on my talks before know I probably go on ad nauseum about cropping. Yeah, but it is an underutilized tool, post-processing composition, if you like, because when you've got, in the heat of the moment, you're shooting away or whatever, you very often don't crop it quite as you would like perfectly in camera. Yeah, and I mean, with modern cameras, there's pixels to burn on most modern cameras. You could, so my general rule is, if in doubt, shoot wider. Okay, because you can always crop in, but you can't necessarily well, you can now, can't you? You can add, you can use AI to add stuff outside the image that isn't actually there and stuff. But if you want to kind of stay away from the AI kind of trickery, just zoom back or step back a few paces and make sure that you leave some extra space around the edges. You can always then use the crop tool to crop into the detail that you want, but it gives you a bit more flexibility. Okay, so that is what. And if you're cropping in a long way, and as Chris is saying there, yeah, you want to keep the pixel numbers up so that you don't lose resolution or whatever. Yeah, I mean, you can do things like kind of like try and get it right in camera so you don't have to crop. And there are also external tools like Topaz Gigapixel, and even in Lightroom, yeah, down in the detail panel, yeah, we've got super resolution, which will double your resolution for you, and that's pretty good. Okay, so if you do crop in and then you want to kind of like up the resolution because it's getting a little bit grainy or a little bit kind of jaggy or whatever, as long as you're shooting in RAW, you can come down here and hit super resolution. Okay, and then it will double the size of, well, quadruple the size of your image. It'll double the resolution of your image. And again, slow machine, time for a cup of tea when you do that. Fast machine like this, you get away with it. Okay, what does it actually do to the pixels? Okay, so let's have a look at, if I take that off and go back to the library view, grid view, and I bring in the right hand panel, the metadata. Okay, this is a 3600 by 5400 image. Okay, so that's the number of pixels, and cropped, with that crop, it was a bit smaller. Okay, so let's go back to D for develop, and let's put the super resolution on. Okay, now let's come back to G for grid. Okay, now you see it's got bigger. It's doubled the size of that cropped image now. Okay, so it's basically multiplied the width and the height, and the number of pixels that are filling the width and the height has just doubled. So you can now zoom in further without losing detail and stuff like that. Okay, so super resolution is quite useful. Okay. Chris, people scaling. I'm not sure what you mean by people scaling. I don't know that.
A bit more information on that, Chris, and then we can pick that up. We could actually probably pick that up in one of the portrait sessions that we're doing later, Joe, can't we? Because we're
absolutely, or yeah, just scaling. I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, if we're in the crop view, I mean, changing the different crop is making elements of the image bigger. Let's say we wanted to just kind of focus down on there. We could do that, and we could just just be focusing on this in transform.
Sorry, I understand. No, it was actually our interpretation of that. Can you show people scaling? Not can you show people scaling? Can we show everyone right. Scaling? Yeah, I understand now.
So in the transform tool, yeah, what we would normally do is we'd either use upright or auto or vertical or whatever, and it fixes the verticals and stuff like that. Okay. But one of the other options in this tool is scale, and it's basically just zooming in and out. Okay, so that's the scale tool. Okay, so that allows you to, now if I zoom out, you can see that we've got white space and all the rest of it. We'd have to drop that into Photoshop or Canva and fill in the gaps and stuff like that. But if you want to zoom in, this is a way of zooming in. Okay, to give you more detail. Yeah, but it keeps all your original. It does, Chris, in that they're still all there available if you wanted to scale back out again. Yeah, but so does doing anything else in Lightroom, because your original image, okay, so whether I use transform or whether I'm in the basic tab here and I go into crop and I zoom in like this, okay, and now I'm not throwing away any pixels, okay, so if I crop in like that, yeah, if I come back to the library, the original dimensions of the raw file haven't changed, okay, it's only my cropped kind of pixels, if you like, that have changed. And in develop, I can always go back to my starting point. Okay, this is one of the key things about Lightroom. It is what's called a non-destructive editor. Okay, so whatever you do to your image, yeah, you can always go back, and the original raw file is sitting there untouched, and all these things that we've been doing in the develop over here, yeah, are just recorded as a set of instructions, and this is the history tab here, yeah. So each time we've done something, it records it as a new instruction. Look, here's the different crops, okay. So it changes the way that the image is being represented on the screen, okay, but it's not permanent. It's not like, oh, now I've done that crop, I've lost all those other pixels forever, okay. They're all there, and if I go back down through my history, I can get back to my original state or any earlier state as well. So I think that's a good question, you know, and it's a good point to have made, I think, for those of you that, you know, are still unsure about that Lightroom never actually affects your original image. And when you get to an image that you're kind of, you know, happier with, so, you know, maybe that's the image that we want at the end, okay? And then we export that as say a new JPEG file for the club, or for, you know, to upload to Conversation or whatever. Now that JPEG won't have any of those other pixels that we've cropped out, but the raw file, the original raw file that came off the camera, yeah, is still always available to us by coming back to the bottom and just going to there. Okay. It is 11:26. You know what time it is now?
Well, we were wondering. I had a private joke with someone the other day about whether we were going to have scones today. Because
Scones. Come on, Kate. Oh dear. I don't know. Yes, I have a scone. I have a nice currant scone, which is going to go in the toaster now. Will be slathered in butter.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested to know what everybody else is having for their quick 10-minute break. Just before we go for the recording, I know Joe knows about this as well. We were just chatting about this before we opened, but next Saturday we're going to do something really crazy on Conversation, and we're having a live art session broadcast from my kitchen table next to me here.
Wow.
So I'll put a link onto the page as well if people would like to have a look. But otherwise, Joe, is the usual 10 minutes okay for you as a break?
It is. Have I been sharing my screen while I've just been talking?
Yes, you have. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Because I just wasn't sure. It just didn't. The share didn't seem to have been.
No, absolutely fine. We've been glued. Okay. Absolutely fine. Good. In fact, I'm going to. If this was my image, I'm interested as to whose image this is, as to how far they would take it in tidying up the graffiti on there. But that may be something to look at later.
I think it's Jill's, isn't it?
Oh, that may be.
She knew where the bridge was. So.
Yeah, Jill, I'm put it in the chat as to how much you tidied up, because this is where I think it defines how. Well, I wasn't going to use a negative phrase, but how sort of overly concerned we are with this kind of thing. I find myself, when I dive into editing, going well beyond what I should do with that kind of thing. But I'm interested, Jill, what you do.
You'd be editing out that Banksy shot, wouldn't you? That Banksy on the thing.
Just ruins the walls, does Banksy? Ruins the walls. No, are you happy for me to pause the recording then, Joe?
Yeah.
Really good. I'll just pause that. Joe, I'll pass over to you to continue with this whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Super. Okay. Right. So I suppose we better do some black and white editing, haven't we? We've been discussing important stuff. So okay. So we're in develop. So V takes us into black and white, or we can just click on the black and white. So let's just go down to the B&W tab now. What this allows you to do is manipulate the underlying colors that are still there. We're just representing the raw file now in a mono state, if you like, but those colors are still there, and we can play with them. So if we move these sliders around, okay, so if there was any red, now look at that, look in that column just there, yeah, as I move the red slider. Okay, so that's obviously red, yeah, and we can darken it or we can brighten it, and you know, or almost make it go away, yeah. So we can make that more of a feature, that red, or we can, you know, almost make it invisible. So this is kind of purely then what you want. Do you want this? And you know, there was something in the chat there about, you know, do people want to keep this graffiti? I think it adds to the story here, or do you want to get rid of it? Okay, and you can play. You see, so orange now. That's interesting. There's obviously quite a lot of orange light here, maybe coming, you know, through from the sky, because it seems to be affecting the whole of the image. Now, what I quite like as we go to the darker end of the spectrum is look at the convergence point, yeah, and as that orange comes down, that convergence point becomes kind of more contrasty. We're losing this detail behind whatever that fence is at the end there when we pull the orange down there, and that almost to me makes that convergence point a little bit more of a feature, yeah, because we've got the black behind it now and stuff like that. So I might leave that where it is. And now the yellows, okay, so we can play here. So what you might want to do now is kind of think about, well, let's play with contrast. So the yellows is going to bring up the lighter stuff perhaps, and that's going to give us a bit more contrast between the darks and the brights. And very often you're looking for this. You're looking to push contrast. Okay. Green. To my eye, there's not a lot happening with the green apart from that line down here. That's where we've got a little bit of green action. There might be a little bit of algae or something on the metal, yeah, or rust or some green rust or whatever. Okay, so do we want to bring that brighter or darker? Yeah, so I don't know, maybe brighter, just to accentuate the line a bit more. And then aqua. No, that's interesting. It's aqua. No, nothing happening really with aqua. That's fine. Blue. Aha. Now, so again, do we want to just make those blues fade into the kind of metalwork like that, or do we want to really bring out that that graffiti that's blue? Yeah. So again, let's go for in our face graffiti, shall we? Mark, you can spend an hour and clean it all up later, okay, with the generative remove.
I don't remove all graffiti, by the way, but I have got a big thing for chewing gum.
Yeah, so there's probably a little bit of there's chewing gum down on the floor. You can spend an hour getting rid of all that later as well. And then purples, again, just a tiny little bit of purple movement there, and then magenta. Nothing really happening. Okay, so you see we've kind of played with those colors, and we've got something that's slightly different. And if you want to see the before and the after of the changes that you made in that black and white tab, you see the little eye there on the black and white thing. If we click that, that was what we had before. That was what we were to after as a result of those changes. Okay, so that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, huge difference. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge tonal difference. Yeah, yeah. So you know, and this is what we're playing with. We're playing with tones in here. Okay. Now, I mean, I'm just going to go very back into the crop. There's so many ways you can run this image. I mean, you can go and bullseye it like that. Okay. For me, I generally like a bit more of an offset, you know, maybe tension on an image. So I would probably be inclined to be thinking about putting that convergence point on maybe one of the thirds lines. And there's lots of interest above the arch. So I would probably put the arch on the bottom line, and then, you know, do we do it left or right? And just, I think you weren't quite standing bang in the middle when you took this image. you were a few inches off to the left-hand side. So I think I would be putting that convergence points there, yeah, for this. And now, do I want all that bright at the top there? This very bright bit at the top? Probably not. So I might get rid of that and just use that darker arch there as the top of the image. Yeah. And now bring in from this side and just see where are we going. So maybe that's going to be the composition that I would go for, because I think sometimes asymmetry introduces a slightly different tension to going with something that's absolutely in the center and bullseye. Okay. And there's no right way to do this or wrong way to do this. All right. There's your way. Yeah. Gina might do this a completely different way. Mark quite often like center, don't you? Particularly on things like your escalators, Mark. You very often go for a central composition, don't you? Yeah. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with doing it either way. They're different artistic representations. And so what's in your head? What makes more sense to you? And I mean, I love story. I love thinking about taking the viewer on a journey, and particularly with an image like this. I mean, it's inherently a journey because we've got this lovely walkway going off into the distance to a door, and doors are wonderful, portals and doors and stuff like that. Can we make any more of this? Particularly when you're dealing with metal and stone, yeah, you generally want to go now down into the present sliders, and you can get a lot of extra out of a shot like this with present sliders. Okay, let's play with the texture. Now look at the difference from no texture to full texture, and let me zoom in a little bit. Let's zoom in here. Okay, so with no texture, it kind of looks quite flat. Halfway up, we've got some detail, but if we push texture all the way up, we're getting kind of lots more contrast and micro detail coming out with texture. And you can really be quite aggressive here. You can go all the way. Okay. And similarly with clarity. Clarity is mid-tone contrast. So it's going to brighten brights and darken darks. Okay, so let's zoom out to the whole picture and see what clarity does. Now look at the difference between that and that. It's kind of, before, looks kind of quite flat now, whereas you whack the clarity all the way up and you've really kind of souped up the contrast. The darks have gone darker, the whites have gone whiter. The form, to me now, the form of that ceiling comes out much better than it did before we'd put the clarity up. You see the difference on the ceiling. Yeah. And it's small little things like this that transform the image from when you started to kind of, where you get on. So, if we bang both of those up, we've now got fine detail coming out in all that metalwork and stuff. We've got this form coming out. And then we can start to, the dehaze, we can darken the darks even more. Or we can, go the other way and go for something really weird looking. Okay. So there we are, a bit of dehaze just to really darken the blacks down a little bit. And what I want to do, I want to get more out of this. I want to get more out of this walkway. Yeah. So now I'm going to go into the masks. And I'm going to look at this, and I'm going to take something like a brush. Okay. Now this is one way of doing it. Okay. So I take a brush, and I just want to kind of get a bit more out of the walkway. So there's a very rough and ready way of doing it. Okay. You take a brush and you just draw in, and now I want to see what I can get if I even whack up the clarity even more. You see, look at that. Yeah. So the brights get brighter, the darks get darker. Yeah. And I want to get as much fine detail in out of this. So I'm pushing clarity and even more. And you see now, maybe I want that to just be a little bit brighter to lead the eye down through the picture a bit more. So I may undehaze it just a little bit, something like that. Okay. So that's one way with a brush. Okay. So and if you want to see the before and after there, just there's the before, there's the after. Okay. Let me show you another way of doing that. So I'll just delete that brush for a minute. Just delete mask 1. Okay. Now, if I wanted to get a very clean line down that left-hand side and down that right-hand side, I could use, say, a linear gradient. So let's build this up. Okay, so I'm going to take a linear gradient here and I'm going to bring it in there, and I want a very sharp linear gradient. So I just want to kind of bring it in and just leave it, you know, where it needs to be. And then what I want to do is I want to try and I grab the middle and I just rotate it around so that it matches the line there, and then grab the middle of it and just pull the middle of the linear gradient to the line. And then I can take one of the outside lines and bring it in. Okay, so there we go. So now there's my linear gradient grabbing that line. Okay, so that's one. Now I want to add another linear gradient. And I'm going to do the same this side. So add a linear gradient there, and I'm just going to move it in to fit that line. And I might need to just make it a bit wider, just rotate here so that it's following the line properly, and then take the outer line and move it in again. So I've now got a sharp line there matching that side. Okay. So now I've got this mask that I've built up, but the mask's the wrong way around. Yeah. And I really want it just to affect this bit and not this bit. Yeah. So what I need to do now is I need to invert the mask. So I've chosen everything but the walkway now. And if I invert the mask now, okay. Now I've got to go up to the top mask there. Okay, I've got to go up to this one and invert that. Let's see whether I can invert mask 1. Boom, boom, boom. Right, undo. Okay, there we go. Now mask 1, which is both of those. Can I invert that? Or maybe duplicate and invert? Let's see. Right, duplicate and invert. Okay, there we are. So that has now given me everything but the mask that I had before. So it's just choosing the walkway, and it's choosing it now much more precisely than I had done using the brush. Yeah. So now I've got that walkway. I can give that the name, so I could call that walkway, so that it's obvious what it is. You can see the little representation there. And now I can start playing with just that area, and get a little bit more out of it. I can darken those darks a bit more. I can push the whites on the walkway a little bit more, and then I can come in and I can whack up the clarity or the texture on that and just get a little bit more out of it. Okay. Yeah. So using masks like that is really, particularly for things like architecture, is getting those lines and then turning them the other way around and stuff like that. Hi, Esther. Good to see you. Yeah. Mark has recorded, so you'll be able to catch up the rest.
Oh, Esther's so far behind. I've just sent her the link on Facebook Live. She's well behind, but we're not going to judge. I'm just going to say, by the way, I'm just going to say what Chris and everybody else has said. This is a great way of using linear grads. I had never thought about using them.
Really, Mark? Really? Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, well, mine are much softer.
You're going to enjoy this, aren't you?
I am, because this really is singing to me.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah. So that's just a little trick with linear grads. So that's there's your bonus for today. All right, let's give somebody else's job. Let's give somebody else's a go. Let's see what else we've got. I mean, just scanning through these, I'm looking at these and I'm looking, well, which ones would I think would immediately jump out at me as kind of, this is going to make a good mono conversion? The rabbits, yeah, kind of probably not, because we've got grassy color, and then the color of the rabbits if we mono convert those, they kind of don't jump out. There's not a high level of contrast and stuff like that. Okay, so I don't know whether that immediately would jump out at me as a thing, but something like that skyline. Now this is going to make a nice mono conversion. Okay, so let's do D for develop, R for crop. I'm going to go straight to 16:9 as a crop to get that panoramic view. Okay, now there's not an awful lot going on this side, so this is the action, isn't it? So I'm just going to pull that in a little bit to maybe like there. So I've got this little whoosh of the ferry on the long exposure going on, and then maybe we'll just pull this in a little bit. Now you see the buildings aren't quite vertical there, and they're not quite vertical here. There's a bit of keystoning going on. Yeah, they're not quite straight. So now we've done our kind of initial effort as a crop. Now we go into our transform, and we could just try doing vertical, and that's made a pretty good job, but I don't know. I like to do this myself. So I'm going to use the guided, or this is the same as guided. Okay, so you click there, and now I'm going to draw down the side of this building, because this should be vertical. And you see I've got the show loop checked there, that little thing down at the bottom. Okay, and if you can't see that toolbar, T for toolbar shows that toolbar if it's not showing on your development screen. Okay, you want that show loop, because without the show loop you don't get that kind of like zoomed in view, that little square. Show loop, you get the zoomed in little square, and now you can be very precise about picking up the corner of that building and the edge there. You see in the loop square, we've got the kind of zoomed in thing, and you can be pixel perfect on the side of that building. And now you just click and hold and drag down and follow down the line of that building as far as it'll go, right? And that should be a vertical line. So you let go, and that's your first vertical line set. So you do that on one side of the image, and now move over to the other side of the image somewhere and find another line that should be vertical. So, this line here of this building here. So let's do the same thing. Okay, so pick up the middle of that column, click and hold, drag down, okay, and then find the bottom of that, which is about there. Okay, make sure you're right on the center there. And as I let go of this second line, you'll see the whole image will kind of snap to those two lines being vertical. Boop. Okay. Now we've lost a little bit now of our edge, haven't we? So we can say okay for that, and let's go back to crop, R for crop, and we'll just pull out a little bit more and just get the edge of that building. There we are. Okay, so there we are. So there's a nice kind of composition, and our buildings are vertical now. Okay, so let's do V, turn it into black and white. Okay, and it's not very good, is it? As a black and white straight away. And this is it. You see, it's not just about pressing the V key or in the basic, just pressing the black and white to make it a good picture. We now need to work on those tones. And when I judge a lot of photography competitions and things, and they often bring me in to judge mono. And I think that the thing that I probably see most from people who don't do well in the mono competitions is they put in gray images. This is a gray image. Yeah, there's lots of mid-tones and slightly darker. But what you need to do is you actually need to pull the darks and the whites out, and you need to increase the contrast, and that will increase the impact of the image. Okay, and we can do that very quickly. We can do that very easily because we've shot in RAW. So all that information is still there. All the exposure information is there. Yeah. We can just, by sliding that exposure, we can make it almost black or almost completely white. So now how do we want our image to look? Yeah. Well, let's just go for a middle of the road. Okay. So what I'd start to do is I always look at the histogram and see, is my histogram right at each edge? Because if it's not, you're not maximizing all the tones. Okay. Yeah, Chris, I'm absolutely with you. Yeah, that white line on the right is just bugging you, isn't it? Yeah. So let's hit half a crop and let's just bring that in just a couple of pixels just to get rid of it. Better. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that histogram has got this gap between the brightest pixels and the edge of the histogram. So if we set the white point, if we extend the dynamic range of the tones in the image so that we pull that bit of the histogram to the right so that it just hits the edge, okay? So come down to the white slider, hold the shift key down, and double click on the word whites. Yeah, now let me undo that, Command Z, Control Z. Okay, so look at the histogram before I did that. Yeah, we've got this gap. So what I'm doing is I'm like sliding the white slider along until that hits the edge there. Okay, so I can do it manually. I can just move that, and you see the histogram is moving, and you see the white tones in the image. The sky is getting brighter. Yeah, and you move it along until just before that little square in the very top right-hand corner of the histogram. Yeah, as soon as that lights up, you're starting to lose pixels to being full white. We call that blowing them out. Okay, and if I keep going further and further and further, yeah, if I hover over that, you can see though that area there in the sky. If I click on that little triangle, yeah, now it shows your blown out pixels as red. Okay, so now I can just roll that white slider back until all that red disappears, and that is just now at the right point. I've not blown any pixels out, but it's as bright as I can make it without blowing pixels out. Okay. And you can do the same with the black slider. So again, shift, double click, and you see it's just pulled the blacks back a little bit. And if I pull the blacks back more, you see the top left-hand corner of the histogram. This lights up. So let me just click on that. And if I pull the blacks back now, you can see along the riverbank, we're getting the stuff that shows up in blue is completely black. We've lost all the detail in those shadows. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. In color, the judges are going to start hammering you for crushed blacks and blown highlights if you do this. But in black and white, yeah, sometimes I want my blacks to be black. So I'm going to turn off the blinkies. I'm just going to click on that top thing there. And I just want to visualize the and I might want these blacks to be completely black and the stuff under the trees to be completely black. Yeah. Or I may not. So, I mean, it's a visual medium. You've got to kind of figure this out yourself. Don't just be setting the automatic white point and black point and always looking at it, you know, and saying, oh, right, that's right. What's right is the image that looks right to you. Now, how do I select the buildings and not the sky and not the river? We've got some new masks. Okay, there's this landscape option that came in a month or two ago to Lightroom. Okay, so if we click on landscapes, it will now break this image up. So there's the sky, there's the architecture, there's the trees and the vegetation, and there's the water. Isn't that cool? Yeah, we don't have to try and mask those ourselves now. Yeah, Chris didn't know about that, maybe. Okay, wonderful. It is so good. Yeah, it is so good. And it works on any image, you know, so, you know, another image with fields and stuff, it'll pick the vegetation up separately and all the rest of it. Yeah, so we've got those 4 masks. So we can actually say, right, create me those 4 masks. Okay, tick them all, create them. And all of a sudden, we've straight away got all those masks. Boom. Yeah, how cool is that? So we want to go play with the architecture mask to start with. So just click on where it says architecture. Okay. And if you want to turn off the overlay, let's just click on that. Don't show the overlay. Right. And I'm going to move the mask thing over here so that it's not in the way. We'll leave it in the sky there. That's fine. Okay. So now we've got the all the buildings are currently selected. So maybe I want to just bring up the brightness on all of those buildings. You see, it's just working on the buildings. Yeah, I'm going to turn the blinkies off as well. There. Yeah. So there's just the buildings. Okay. So maybe we want to bring them up. You know, we'll give them another stop of exposure. Well, that's starting to look better already, isn't it? Yeah. And now I'm going to come down to the present sliders again. Yeah, texture and clarity and dehaze. Now, clarity is going to just light these up. Let's see what the clarity does. Boom. Oh, yeah. It's just like wonderful, isn't it? Boom. Look at that. Yeah. It just makes them ping, brings them up. Super. Okay. So clarity and then texture is going to give you every single tiny little line of detail as well. Yeah. So if we zoom into one of those bigger buildings, let's zoom into some, hold the shift key down and just pull down. Okay. Now let's see what we're getting with texture and clarity here. Okay, so that's before we do anything with texture and clarity. And it's a bit gray, it's a bit boring. Yeah. So if we pop the clarity up, boom, look at that. The darker comes dark, the whiter comes white, and then the texture is just really sharpening up all the edges. All the edges. It makes just so much difference. Yeah. Now, there's lots of detail to be had in there. So now perhaps we start to get really precise. Okay. So we'll create a new mask now. Yeah. And maybe I want to use a brush or select. Let's try selecting an object. Let's see whether, so I'll make my brush a bit smaller. Yeah. And I'll just see whether if I just draw around there, I'm not being very careful. I'm just you just have to get the edges in. Okay. Now it's just picked up that side of the build, and then I might just want to add this little bit at the top as well. So let's just add that in as well, and I can just add that in with a little brush. Okay, and I'll just add in the rest of the top there. Okay, so now I've got that part of the building. Yeah, and I can just bring that up a little bit. Yeah, and I can maybe make the whites a bit whiter or darker. Yeah, and again, if I want to, I can pop in some clarity and some texture. Yeah. So before and after from that mask, yeah, made a lot of difference to that little bit of the building, hasn't it? Yeah. So if I hit the Z key to come out to the full thing, yeah. When you start to look at different little bits of your picture, yeah. Well, do I want that to be dark like it was before? Or do I want it to be a little bit brighter and give me a bit more detail? Yeah. No right answer, no wrong answer here. There's the answer for you. Yeah. I'm going to leave it a little bit brighter. Okay. And now I might look at this and I might say, well, look, these trees just here, particularly those trees. I want to get more detail out of those trees because they're very, very dark and very, very heavy. And they're kind of, you know, that's where my eye's being pulled down to almost. Yeah. So I'm going to create a new mask. And let's do an object. And this time with the object, rather than drawing, you know, a line around them, I'm just going to see whether I can just select it as a square. Let's see whether it'll recognize those trees as I just draw a square over them like that. Let's see. That's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah, it's getting more and more intelligent. Or I could use the vegetation mask, Chris, but then it would have given me all the other trees and stuff as well. And I just want to focus on these trees here. Okay, so that's those trees here. So and I might now call this, you know, central trees. Okay, and now let's just see whether I can bring the shadows up a bit in those trees. Yeah. And maybe the texture will give me just the detail. Boom. Yeah. So let's see before, after. Yeah. That you're doing just those trees. So you need to now work the scene. Okay. Until you get the image looking something like you want. Do we want a bit more sky detail? Do we want to darken that sky off and make it a bit more apocalyptic? Yeah. So let's have a look. Let's go back into the masks and let's go down to our sky mask. And there's our sky mask. Okay, so let's put this over here. Yeah. Turn off the overlay. So now what can we do with the sky? Well, dehaze is probably a good place to start when you're playing with sky. So let's just darken it off a little bit. Yeah. And now we've got a little bit more drama going on in the sky. Yeah. You know, we've got a bit more detail coming out on the sky. Now, we could use clarity. So let's try that then. Okay, let's see what clarity does. And clarity gives us kind of a little bit of darker in those darker areas and you know, brighter in the brighter areas. But I tend to find that dehaze gives me a slightly better look normally than using clarity on dehaze. Yeah, Mark says clarity can be harsh on the sky. The texture tends to stay a little bit better with dehaze. And now, let's say I want to soften the sky. Go left on texture. Yeah. And let me just go a bit crazy. So look, this if you go left, it just softens the sky. If you go right, it sharpens it. Okay, so if you just want to and in something like this where you've got very, very sharp buildings and with all those lovely edges and stuff, quite often just select the sky and just go left on texture, and it just softens it off even more, just makes the clouds just blend a little bit more. Okay, so yeah, and it's good for things, as Gina's saying, things like dog's fur and stuff like that as well. You can either use it, slide it to the right, and that every single piece of fur will ping. Every single brick, every single, you know, leaf on those trees pings when you go to the right with texture. When you go to the left with texture, it kind of smooths things out. So you know, you can use it both ways. But I mean, the difference between that, which is what we started with, and that is quite considerable. Yeah, start, finish. Yeah. And I'm using, so I just pressed the L key twice to go to lights out. Okay, and then the before and after is the / key. Okay, so that just shows you where we were when we started and where we are now.
Joe, do you think it would be worth me sharing Alan's edited image so you can see the difference between his edit and your edit as well?
I think I've got it.
Oh, you've got it. Okay,
yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah, because I've got the so let's go back to library, G for grid. Yeah, and let's.
It's always good to read people's opinions in the chat as well about how they would edit things. This is the thing about cropping and editing. It's so personal, isn't it? It's so
at the moment, I'm just showing the raw folder. Okay. If I want to show both folders together, I can hold my command key or the control key down and click on that folder as well. And now it's showing both. Yeah. And now you can see here's presumably the edited version. So I'll shift and click, and let's go to the survey view. Okay, and that shows both of them together. And I'll close the left and the right hand. Okay, so there's my quick edit. Here's Alan's bigger edit. So you've left the crop as it was, which gives you more river and gives you more sky, and you know there's nothing wrong with that. It looks to me like you've put some kind of a radial filter that's just brightened these buildings up a little bit more because these ones are a little bit darker. Yeah, but you certainly raised the buildings. They were all very dark before, weren't you? Yeah. And then maybe you've run a brush along these buildings because we've got maybe a little bit of haloing over the top of the buildings, you know, where the sky and the buildings, that separation is. So that's one of the things you want to try and avoid when you're adjusting kind of contrast and stuff, particularly between sky and buildings. If you're looking around and you're seeing, you know, on those edges there, I'm seeing kind of a little bit of a halo of light. So that's something to try and avoid. And using the sky mask and the architecture mask will make those halos kind of much less apparent, rather than trying to just brush the buildings or something like that. So that's just something to think about. But I mean, I love the edit, and I love your end of the world sky.
Actually, in fact, I'm going to just say as well, Jill has just asked whether we can see hers side by side.
Yes, we will.
That's
We'll go.
great
Yes,
as well, Jill, because I had yours ready as well, Jill, and I think it's really fascinating to watch the difference between the two. Really, really is. So Jill's was the
Jill's was the
bridge.
this, wasn't it? Yeah. So have we got Jill's? Have we got Jill's edit on that? There it is. Yeah. So so I think it's N. Yes, N takes us to survey mode. So there we are. So I think this is my edit, isn't it? Because I went off center, and Jill, I think that's your edit on the right. So you've stayed central. Yeah. So again, you've lost that top, which I found distracting as well. So you've cropped into the top. You've cropped in and made it kind of, what is that? It's not 4:5, is it? That's probably 6:4, probably, ratio. Whereas I stayed a little wider. Yeah, mine's nearer kind of 10:8 or 4:3. So you've gone for a taller, which works for the crop that you for the composition that you've done, because you've gone for a central thing, so that height works well. Yeah, and then you've centered it, so you know the lines are touching the front at the kind of the same place. The verticals are all working quite well. That's nice. And you've accentuated the contrast. You've darkened those darks off even more. You see, look at your column here against my column here. I've gone for a different kind of toning. You've gone for a much more black and white kind of toning, which is great. Okay, so yeah. But you know, and you know, Chris has said like my off-center one perhaps makes it more dynamic. Yeah, but that's the thing. This is why I say it's so important to play with the cropping and see what works and what doesn't. And sometimes, you know, this naturally takes you to that center because it's that convergence point and whatever. So then it's kind of, okay, well, what else could I do? What are other possibilities, you know? And sometimes it's those other possibilities that maybe will just take it, you know, give you another couple of points in the competition, because, you know, oh, I wouldn't have thought of doing that with that image. And it adds a level perhaps of interest or whatever, something like that. So yeah, try when I was kind of learning about composition, of a great friend of mine in South Africa, Henry Oppel, taught me a lot about composition. And you know, the club down there that I'm still a member of, actually, they always used to say bullseye shots. Yeah, no, we don't want bullseye shots. Yeah, okay, you know, take it off center. Yeah, occasionally you'll get a shot where it should be bullseye, but always try off center as well. Always try asymmetry and stuff like that. So
Fantastic. It's so interesting to see people's responses as well. And these, having them side by side, is the big impact, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah.
It's like the reveal at the end. I'm just going to say to those people, say to those people again, if anybody would be happy with sharing their raw files for other people to edit, set up a folder, and people can jump in and drop those things in there. I don't know if we've got a chance for one more, Joe. Before
let's do a quick one more. Let's do it. Let's see whether we can make a fine art of this. Is it a rabbit or a hare? This one, I don't know. I don't know whether it's a rabbit or a hare, but let's see whether we can make him into a supermodel. So D for develop. Bring in the right-hand panel. Take off the left-hand one. Does anybody remember what the shortcut keys are to close the panels down? Those of you who are on my Lightroom course, well, the tab key opens and closes the left and the right panel together. So that's one way of doing it. If you want to open and close the panels, you know, one at a time, and we've got 4 panels there. We've got top, bottom, left, and right. F5, F6, F7, F8. So F5 is the top panel. Yeah. F6 is the bottom panel. F7 left, and F8 is right. Okay. And on a Mac, you've got those F keys on the top of the keyboard, but when you press them, they don't work. And you have to hold the function key down, which is the bottom left-hand key on your Mac keyboard, and then press the F key for them to work as function keys. Okay. So that's Mike saying, that's how it worked. And Shift and Tab. Yeah. So if you hold the Shift key down and press Tab, that opens and closes all 4 tabs at once for you. Yeah. So that's sometimes useful. Okay. So maybe I open close all the tabs like that, and then just bring in the right hand tab. Yeah, which is F6, F5, 6, 7, 8. So F8 brings in just the right hand tab. So that's my normal editing mode in here. Now, he's nowhere. He's not quite on the third line. He's not in the middle. So I'm going to do a little bit of a crop, and also, I want him bigger in frame because he's quite small in relation to the whole of the frame here. Now, Paul may kind of say I'm massacring his shot because he's left the foreground in that's lovely and blurred. Look at that lovely blur in those, the grass at the very foreground. And then we've got the hare or the rabbit is in perfect focus. And then as we get further and further back towards the top of the shot, we've got, again, the lovely blur going out. So we've got a travel through this image, and it's moving, the eyes moved from blur to sharp. So, the way that he's used the depth of field on this is very good in terms of it's taking us to the hare. Okay, so I'm gonna crop. He's looking into negative space, and there's this lovely kind of meadowy thing here. So I'm going to go 16:9. I love 16:9. Okay, there we are. And I'm going to kind of bring him probably and put his eye on the thirds intersection at the top there. Okay, so that's a kind of classic. Oh, right. Okay, Glenda. So this looks like a rabbit, does it? Yeah, well, I will be led by Glenda on this one. Okay, so thank you, Glenda. So now we've got the rabbit, and that rabbit's got quite big now compared to how big he was before relative to the whole of the image. We've still got blur in the foreground, we've still got blur in the back, so I'm happy with that. Yeah, and if we wanted to, we could make him even bigger. Yeah, stuff like that. So now when you're playing with the crop like this, and you might want to turn the overlays on or off. So H key hides the overlay. Okay, just now scan around, and is there anything that's kind of just coming into shot, distracting, particularly on the edges? Now that looks about right, doesn't it? So that's fine. And now you see, now he's that much bigger. We're getting that lovely backlight coming out much better on his ears and stuff like that. V puts him into black and white. Now, how do we separate him from the background? Okay, well, we could just try subject. And that's made a pretty good job of picking him out. Yeah. And when you do a subject mask like that, yeah, click on it and subtract background. You see we're getting a little bit of kind of, there's something there that's not the rabbit. Yeah. So if we just subtract the select background, let's see whether it just cleans up those extra bits. Boom. Yeah, little trick. So always try that. Always try when you do use the subject selection, just do a select background, subtract the background from it. So we've got a pretty good rabbit. Okay, so we'll call that rabbit. Okay. And now I've got that good mask of the rabbit. Yeah, I'm going to duplicate and invert it. And that gives me everything but the rabbit, and a better mask than I would just get from background. Okay, so that, and rabbit inverted, I can double click on that and just call that field. Okay, so now we've got our rabbit and we've got our field. So let's work the field. So what do we want to do with the field? Do we want to make the field a bit brighter? Or do we want to make it a bit darker and have the rabbit kind of, kind of standing out? I think let's go a bit high contrast, higher key on this. Yeah, let's see whether we can play with that. So with the field, let's just kind of make the whites even whiter and soften it maybe, or do we want to clarify it even more? Let's just make the field a bit more dreamy. Yeah, something like that. And then I'm maybe gonna come in and just try and get rid of these very, very harsh things with, I might do then a gen remove or something like that. Okay, let's just get rid of those. Yes. Don't show me that all the time. Got it. Right, so that there, I'm just going to say, just get rid of that for me, and that line there, and this over here. Okay, because I'm just, anything that just catches my eye in the background. Okay, just make those go away for me. Okay, so now that's just going to remove those 5 areas.
Just while that's doing that, Joe, Chris has just commented that negative dehaze can often work nicely on backgrounds like this. Thanks very much, Chris. That's a really good shout.
That's a good point. Yeah, I'll show you that now. So you see that there's those 5 separate masks that I just created. Yeah, and we can try, and again, the H key hides the handles if you don't want to see the handles. And now you can just cycle through the 3 options and just see. I mean, that looks pretty good to me. That got rid of all those distractions for me. I'm happy with that. Yeah. So we'll say fine on that. Okay, and let's just go down to that then. So the dehaze, yeah. Open up the masks again. Okay, and choose the field. Okay. Now, what would negative dehaze do? Okay, let me put clarity and texture back where they were. Watch what negative dehaze does. It just gives you that golden glowy kind of look. Yeah, in a similar way to what we were getting before. So then a bit more clarity, a bit more less texture, and we've kind of got to, our rabbit is now in his dream state field. Yeah. So now let's go to the rabbit. Can we make a little bit more of the rabbit? We definitely will be able to with texture. Yeah. Now look what texture does to the rabbit. Let me just zoom in on the rabbit a little bit more. Hold the shift key down, just pull that down. Okay, now he's a little bit over sharpened now. I'm so big, but we can pull now. Let's just go back out to full. No, I don't want to set it as rejected. I want to come out here, but that texture is going to just bring all that detail out, which again, set against the softening of the background, makes him even more kind of pingy. Yeah. Clarity, a little bit of clarity maybe, and maybe just he's still quite dark. I don't know, maybe just bring the shadows up a little bit. Yeah, just enough, something like that. Oh, I'm going to leave him there. Now, do we want a little vignette just to bring the eye into the rabbit? In that case, the vignette down in effects is not the right one to use, because the rabbit's over here. If the rabbit was in the middle, that vignette would work. Yeah, but in this case, that kind of a vignette isn't really going to work very well. Okay, so in this case, if you do want the rabbit to kind of, the eye to be moved to the rabbit even more than it is already, you do it with another radial filter, another radial gradient. So draw a radial gradient here, okay, on the rabbit, invert it. So come to invert, or the apostrophe key. Okay, and now darken off the rest of the image, and then you can kind of play with the feather on this and just make it, So now, if you want to start drawing the eye, and H hides the line for the radial filter. So if you wanted to, you could just start darkening that off a bit more and just leave it, or you could make the radial filter much bigger even, and just darken the corners off, or this end of the image, just to take the eye down a little bit more towards the rabbit. So, just a very, very faint vignette. You almost don't know there is one there, but it's slightly darker here, and the eye is moved over to the rabbit. So I think we've gone from that to that. And again, it's a slightly different take on black and white, isn't it? It was kind of a slightly different one. So let's see what you did with that one. Paul, wasn't it? Bum bum bum. Now, it's not that one.
I don't think we've got Paul's edit.
He may not have sent
I don't think we've got Paul's edit. No,
I don't think we've got Paul's edit, which is a pity.
Okay.
So I hope that gave everybody a few ideas on mono. Yeah. Yeah, I use blue for my overlay. So when I'm in D for develop and we're in here, my overlays and stuff, I typically have as blue. And the reason for that is that I'm colorblind and I don't see red. So by default, the overlay would normally be red. But what I normally do is go up somewhere here because I see that better. So that's why in most of these sessions and stuff, I'll be using a blue overlay because I just don't pick red up very well. Okay. So there, I will stop the share.
Oh, fantastic, Joe. Well done.
I don't think anybody went off to do something different. We kept most people today.
Absolutely. Everybody. In fact, we gained. We gained.
That's right, we gained Esther, didn't we? That's right. Yeah. Fantastic. Wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much for everybody coming along to support this, because it's a brand new series and we always love these. And we thought it's just great to get together and do things like this on a Saturday morning, which is just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much to everybody, as well as for Joe as well. Yeah. Just a question that I picked up from, I think it was, let me just open it up. It was Chris earlier. And I think this is something we can also talk about over the next few sessions as well, because I think this could be a recurring theme. Chris said whether we'd ever used texture or clarity right up to 100. Now, I know not necessarily clarity, but I've used texture right up to 100. But what about yourself, Joe? Do you find yourself?
Yeah, I love texture. I mean, it's wonderful. Clarity, probably not so much. Clarity, you've got to be it's quite a heavy tool, clarity. So you've got to be a little bit more kind of careful with it. But texture, oh yeah, texture, just whack it up.
What's the worst that could happen?
Absolutely, that's right. You can always undo it. It's not affecting anything. You can always go back. So yeah.
And I'm also just going to capture Chris's question, this last question that she just popped on, just before we finish. And Chris has just asked about what kind of tool we use when there's lots of sky. So I'm going to hold on to that question until we get
doing landscapes next time.
Landscape editing.
That's right.
And we'll put it on there as well. I'll also email everybody a link to a Padlet page so people can ask questions ahead of time. I'll also link to Joe's Notion page so that we've got all of that as well. There'll be an AI generated meeting notes file that I'll email out to everybody as well. So you get lots of things that you can
Christmas, isn't it? God.
Loads of things you can capture. Oh, it was a joke about the overlay color. Oh, could you please put a smiley face when you're asking jokey questions?
Yeah.
I don't know them down.
But that's why it's blue, because it isn't a standard, unless you change it, it's red. So yeah.
I get it. Well, it's a jokey color now. I get it. Okay, thank you so much. As usual, Joe, another masterclass. Thanks very much, Alan. Really, really appreciate you coming along as well. Until the next time, which is in 2 weeks, get your images in. I'll send the links out. Get your images in, and we can all have a play with them.
Okay. See you in 2 weeks.
Thanks very much. Take care, everybody.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.